Linh-chan and Dimi-chan, write code. And we can go and actually start it in just a moment. But I do want to add one last feature to the queue management, so that way I can consider it more or less complete and not have to come back to it. And I want when, for example, we start we start the app and then we say we close this, I want the app to quit. And this is also useful when we double click a movie file and it opens in our video Resizer app. We want it to quit after it's done doing work. That was the whole point of our flag close on finish, right? So to do that, there's a very simple callback that we can use. So it's called application should terminate something. Application should terminate after last window closed. So this will be called whenever our last window is closed, and it will let us actually quit. And we don't want the user to be able to close the queue window, so we're going to go in here, select the queue window, and turn off closing. This will prevent the user from doing it, but it will allow us to do it programmatically. So when we queue our next job, if there are no jobs left, so we can check if we are to close on finish, we should check that first. And we want to check if there's nothing left in the queue. Queue.count is 0. So you can also say not queue.count, but I prefer this as a little bit more clear, counterintuitively to this right here. And we also want to make sure that we don't have a current job. So since we don't have a current job and there's nothing left in the queue, and we're set to close on finish, we should close our queue window, and that will in turn close the application. So here we can very easily say queue window order out, and that's just going to close it, and we don't have to specify anything for the sender since it says it's nullable. And that will close our queue window and clean everything up. And I believe that will be it for most of the queue management, which allows us to start work on the actual job. So going to the job, we want to be able to transcode video. And this is a fairly complicated, I should say, piece of machinery, but it's not unsurmountable. So if you were to go to like Stack Overflow, there's plenty of examples of how to use AV Asset Writer and AV Asset Reader to do pretty much anything you want. So we're going to be coding it twice as we make progress with this. But basically, we can go ahead and implement a start method. So we can just say start since we declared it already. And here's our start method. And this is also a good time to think about what other properties we want to have on the job. So for instance, we had an icon and stuff like that in that job window, and we want to actually be able to hook all that up, right? So I'm going to make a bunch of properties that can be used by the job window to be able to show information. So we can have a property non-atomic. So non-atomic is very useful for anything that you're going to override, because then that means that you can forget about multi-threading and just assume a fast pass instead of making sure that everything is synchronized for the property access. So most cases that's what you want, but in some cases you might actually want something that's atomic, although I'd say it's rare nowadays. But we will have a reference to an image, and this can be our icon. And then I'm just going to copy this a bunch of times so I don't have to type it. And then we're going to make some other properties. So we have one for our string. So this is going to be our status text, which is going to show up on top of that progress bar. And we need to be sure, since this is a string and someone can give us a mutable string, we want to take a copy of that to make sure they can't change stuff after the fact. And then we want a float to represent our actual progress. and then we want two booleans to represent our status. So if we are finished and if we're still processing. So the basic rundown is if we're not started, this is going to be no and no. Once we do start, this is going to be yes, and until we finish, this is going to be no. And this is going to be a value from 0 to 1. This is going to contain text like encoding file 1, finished encoding file 1, something like that. And this is going to have our file icon. So we can go ahead actually and directly hook these up so that way we know what happens when they change, and we will do this via bindings. So that's one of the advantages of using bindings, is it makes it very simple to hook things up like this. So we'll go ahead and choose our image view, and we will bind its, I believe it's its value, but let's double check. Unless I never bound it to anything. I think I did. Yeah. Yeah, so we're going to bind the value to the table cell, and we're going to say this is going to be bound to the icon. And then this is going to be bound to the status text. And this is going to be bound to the progress, I believe. Check. Yeah. And we need to make sure to set this guy to be from 0 to 1, because it doesn't start off, it starts off as 0 to 100. So 0 to 1. And we also want to use that processing to trigger if it should show up like this or if it should show up as a progress bar. So we can go ahead and say if it is indeterminate, depends on the object value dot processing. And we want to, processing is true when it's doing work, so we don't want it to be indeterminate when it's true, we want it to be when it's false. So we'll use a ns-negate Boolean transformer to turn it from true to false and from false to true. And we will also hide it when we're done. Oof. Got finished. Lots of things to forget. I think this is a big reason why a lot of people don't like bindings, is because it's easy to forget adding all these things because you don't see it in code afterwards. But it does make simple things like this much easier to set up. So we can now see that you'll soon see that when I actually set all these properties to something, that table is actually going to update automatically. So the first place we can do that actually is very early on when we set that path. We can go ahead and modify stuff. So we'll go, set path. So here we're overriding the setter for our property. So I'll say path equals path.copy. So we'll get, like we said before, we'll get a copy of that. And now we'll just set our status string status text to equal something intelligible. So a string with format. And we'll say waiting to encode. And then we will put, if I remember, curly quotes. And then we will put our format thing right there. And we'll specify our path. Our path's last component. Last path component. I think I got confused somewhere down the line. Okay, autocomplete. Okay, so we'll set the path and then we'll set the icon. So we can get the icon conveniently from NS Workspace. So NS Workspace has a shared workspace. Oh, I think I know why. We are currently using Foundation only in NS Workspace as part of Cocoa or AppKit. So that should get it working properly. Workspace, there we go. Yay, autocomplete. You're my friend. If it weren't for autocomplete, my brain would have melted by now. So we'll pass our path to the workspace, and that will give us an icon, conveniently. And then we can go from there. So at this time, I also want to set the output path. That way we have it early, and then we'll set some defaults as well that we can have early, but we're not doing much of anything yet, so that's not going to come into play yet. So as before, if we don't notify the system that we're changing these things, then nothing will get done. So we're going to go ahead and override our set status text properties and the set icon properties, so that way the system can be notified that they were in fact changed. Copy. So we'll say self will change value for key, status text. And this will tell the system that we did change it, which will propagate it to the binding system. Change value for key, status text. And we'll do the same for the icon. Set icon. So we can go right away. We'll change value for key, icon equals icon. Nice and simple. So here we're setting the internal property variable to the variable that was declared via the method, so the argument. So we're taking the argument and we're putting in the property basically. And then here we'll go ahead and say self did change value for key, icon. And I'm being told to drink water. And we should also do this for the progress. So we're not setting the progress yet, so we can just get it out of the way now. So set progress. This is kind of a very simple grunt work that is easy to miscopy paste. So I'm going to do this carefully. And then set processing. And then finally set finished. Go ahead and copy paste all of this. This one needs the underscore and same. I don't know what happened here, but we will fix it. There we go. So a convenient shortcut for fixing stuff like indentation stuff in Xcode is just select everything and do Control-I, and that will fix everything nice and pretty. And I don't like this being up there. As I said, I'm an old school Objective-C coder, so the templates all have them up here, and I learned with it down here, so I put it down there.
You have a comment.
I have a comment.
Said, thanks for the tutorial. Love the queue feature.
I'm glad you liked how it was implemented. I'm very curious as well how other people implement such things. But I'd say that's a fairly common thing you'll see in programming is queues and managing lots of tasks. So it's good to have a fair amount of different ways that you're prepared to code that kind of thing.
This person's profile name is Mochi Neko.
Mochi Neko and me. Aw, my cat's name is Mochi and my company name is Mochi Dev. So I like you, sir, or ma'am. I'm not too sure. Let's go ahead and build and run, and we should see a movie icon in our queue now. So let's make sure this works. Otherwise, we'll go back to debugging. as fun as that is. So yeah, there we go. Waiting to encode small.mp4, and there's our icon. And yeah, that seems good. So let's go ahead and actually start encoding something.
Oh, there's more?
Yeah, there's a lot more. It's not hooked up to anything. So we will go ahead and start our start method. So we'll say self.status text equals ns string string with format, and then now this time we'll say encoding, and then we'll put a curly quote option. So option left bracket puts a curly quote, and shift option left bracket puts the end curly quote, if you want to be fancy.
There's another comment. Can this be reconfigured to also use what are those?
JPEG, ping, GIF. GIF. Just messing with you.
Or is it exclusive to video?
So this one would be exclusive to video, but you could make another job. Like you can make job as a main parent class, and then make subclasses as like a video job or a file job, and then just change the start to do something with images instead of video. So this one is kind of focused on video, which is quite complicated, which is why I figured people might be interested in seeing someone do it firsthand. That way they can see it's not that daunting, which I hope I don't scare people off. But images should be much easier than with video. So maybe we can add that as a future feature, actually, and show you how to do it.
In another video.
Yeah.
Or in another live
stream. My voice is not going to survive that long, especially if I am making it up on the spot. So let's path components. I don't know why the autocomplete doesn't like me right there, but there it is. So that will change the text as soon as it starts. So if there are multiple items, the first one will be encoding, the second one will be waiting to be encoded, kind of thing. And we'll also say self.processing to be equal to yes. So and now we can actually do the work of encoding it. And to do this, we will want to actually let me gather my thoughts. So we will want to actually have a lot of new instance variables to hold state for us. So some things that we are going to be tracking, for instance, are going to be like different queues, because this part is unfortunately multi-threaded and you can't get away from that. So we're going to go ahead and declare a private interface for job. And we want to keep a whole bunch of private variables. And this starts with a bunch of queues. So we have a dispatch queue type. And we're going to have a main queue, which is going to be responsible for keeping everything together. So serialization queue. And then we're going to have an audio and a video queue, because we do need to maintain the audio. We don't want the audio to disappear on us in the video. We want a video queue to process the video frames. And then we want a dispatch group to kind of encapsulate all the changes that are happening in the other queues and keep them all in one place. I think that would be a good way of explaining that. I'm not too sure. Dispatch group. And then we want a segmenter. No, we don't need that. So we have our dispatch group and then our queues. We also want to hold on to a reference of our reader and our writer. So our reader is going to read information from the video file, and our writer is going to write information to a new video file. Asset reader. So asset reader. I can enjoy my generic naming convention at this point. Writer. No. And my inability to spell. Writer.
Is it reading or reader?
It is a reader. Thank you. It would have auto-completed, but then it would have been an awkward everywhere. we want to know when either the video or the audio have finished, because they can finish independently. Video finished. Excuse me. Audio finished. And then we want to have connections to our reader for the audio and the video. AV asset reader. So this is a bunch of setup, but it's basically going to help us afterwards connect everything up. And then once everything's connected, we don't really need to worry too much about how to actually write video frames, because that would be crazy. H.264 is a monster of a spec, and it does lots of crazy things to make sure your video files are small. So we'll let someone else deal with that, namely Apple. They wrote some nice libraries that deal with all that, which let us write nice code like this to use it. So we want one track output for our audio, and we want one track output for our video. Video output. And similarly, we want one AV writer input. We want one input for our audio. So it's very symmetric. Input for the audio. And then let's change this. Writer. Writer. And finally, we want to be able to hold on to our settings in case anything goes wrong. We can print them out and kind of get a better understanding of what went wrong, because just changing one of the settings without really knowing what it does can cause the whole thing to fail, which is always unpleasant. And finally, we want to save where we're going to export the file to. So that's going to be our output URL. Output URL. And conveniently, the first thing that we're going to set is our output URL. So we can go ahead and set that right here. So our output URL is going to be equal to crazy soup of code, NSURL. So we're going to get a file URL with the path, and now we're going to make a crazy path. So we're going to use our existing path. We are going to, come on computer, that's string by deleting path extension. So we're going to get rid of the MOV that's at the end of our path. We're going to string by appending string. We're going to add a suffix to our files so we don't modify the original, resized. And this way we can compare with the original and see if we did everything properly. And then finally, we want to re-add that path extension. So we still want it to be called MOV if it was called MOV originally. So we're going to get the original path extension from the path directly. So path.path extension. Okay, so one more time. We are going to take our original path. So let's say this is like home directory / myfile.mov. We're going to get rid of the .mov. We are going to add -resize to it. So it's going to now be my home folder / home / my video without the MOV. Then we're going to get the whatever the extension was of the original file. So in this case, it's MOV. And then we're going to add the MOV onto this whole soup right there. And then we're going to create a URL with all that. So now that we have our output, we can go and start making, we can start initializing all these instance variables that we set up previously. So the first one that we want to do is to set up the queues. So let's start with that. So we'll get our main queue, main serialization queue, and we will make a new dispatch queue. So this part is all C, so that's why everything is lowercase all of a sudden. So we'll create a dispatch queue. Because it's C and we want to kind of have some intelligent logging, we need to do some conversions from Objective-C. So we'll take an Objective-C NS string, and then we'll get a nice formatted string that includes our path, so that way we can debug this if nothing works. Always plan to debug if something doesn't work, otherwise you will not know what to do next. Serialization queue. So this will be called whatever our file name is, serialization queue. And this will be only visible inside of Xcode, so it's for you and that's not for anyone else. And we'll use the file name. And when I say last path component, a file name is typically something crazy along the lines of, oh, did it work? Something along the lines of, so if I go here, show path, it's going to be slash Dimitri Buñuel slash desktop slash video resizer slash job. So I don't want all of this stuff. I just want the job part. So that's why I go last path component. So each of these is a path component from Coco's point of view, and we just want the last one. So that's why I do that. And then since this is an Objective-C string, we need a C string. So we're going to go ahead and say .utf8 string, and that's going to give us a C string, a null terminated C string. And then as for options go, we want to say that this is a serial queue, so that way things don't start happening out of order, because that would be confusing. So we'll say it's a serial queue. The opposite of this is a concurrent queue, so you have two options, serial or concurrent. I don't know what serial inactive is. Okay, well, yeah, basically you have serial and concurrent. Concurrent means that whatever you put on the queue, if you have a multi-core computer, you're going to have two things happening at the same time, which, unless you know what to do in that situation, is usually not what you want. Even though it sounds faster, it tends to get messy. So we'll leave that as it is for now, and then we want an audio serialization queue. And I'm just going to copy paste from this point on to make it simpler. And we're just going to go ahead and say this one's an audio serialization queue. And then we want a video serialization queue. Video. And both of these are also serial, so that way the frames are dealt with in order, and we don't have things going out of order as we're processing them, which would be end up with a video that has stuff out of order, which is typically, again, what we don't want. And finally, we're going to load our tracks from our asset. So these should be already loaded because we did say .tracks before. But we should load them just in case, so that way everything is clean. Tracks. And we're sure that they're there. And then we are going to make sure that we are on our main serialization queue, because here it's not defined what queue we'll end up being. We're not on the main queue, that's for sure. And we're probably in AV Foundation's queue. So anything we do here may not agree with anything else. So we do want to make sure that we start working on our main serialization queue. So let's go ahead and do the work. So dispatch asynchronously means that we're going to start working on this after the tracks are loaded. Let's add our semicolons everywhere. That's something else that if you're used to, like JavaScript or Swift, you don't have to put semicolons everywhere unless you want to. Whereas other languages like C, you have to put them everywhere. So let's say we were successful, because I'm sure we were, on this error. Let's set up an error just in case there was a problem. So we're setting up that we were successful as a default case, and then anytime that we're doing something, we're essentially overriding it. So for the first chance we get, we're going to check if we actually did load our tracks. So we're going to say self.asset, excuse me, status of value for key, and this is going to allow us to check if we were able to load tracks successfully. Tracks, I'm spelling that correctly, right? And we'll put the error inside of that, and that will allow us to use that error later on. And then we want to make sure that this is equal to AV key value status loaded. That means that we did load it, which means success will be true. If it's not loaded, success will be false or no, as it's called in Objective-C. Instead of true, you have yes, and instead of false, you have a big fat no. It's kind of like the computer screaming at you. And then we can check if we're successful. Then we can proceed and do something. Success. Oh, the crazy emails that I get. Do you want to read what it says?
It says, "Hi, I always have a appreciation for Elements application. You can offer me the Elements periodic table Pro for iOS application for free because currently I have lost all my money on the healthcare of my family." And that was it. It's not even like, can you please give me a copy? It's like, you can give me a copy. Like, you need to give me a copy.
The healthcare of my family depends on me needing to look up a periodic table.
Yeah.
So, for those not in the know, I am the author of an iOS periodic table app that has been out since iPhone OS 2.0, and it's called Elements, and it's been out forever, and it hasn't been updated in forever as well. But it was fairly successful back in its day as a periodic table app, and I personally think it's still the prettiest one, even though there are some now interesting bugs due to changes in iOS. But other people can play around with those bugs until I get some time to fully dive into fixing it, unfortunately. This series was originally live streamed, so we split it up into 30-minute episodes so it can be uploaded. Since it does take more planning to make this kind of content, we don't plan on producing it very often, but if you do enjoy it, please subscribe on YouTube or Twitch and let us know in the comments below or on Twitter. Thanks! Bye, Chen-chens!